40-year-old alleged sex trafficker Matt Gaetz was in the news again involving a teenager. But this time, it was because Gaetz got owned over 2 million times by a 19-year-old activist. I'm sure by now you've seen this video of Matt Gaetz giving a misogynistic and fatphobic speech at the Turning Point USA Student Action Summit.
Have you watched these pro-abortion, pro-murder rallies? The people are just disgusting. Like, why is it that the women with the least likelihood of getting pregnant are the ones most worried about having abortions? Nobody wants to impregnate you if you look like a thumb.
This is actually George Carlin's joke about anti-abortionists like Matt Gaetz, but Gaetz tried to reverse it so he could attack women, and leave it to a Republican to steal someone else's joke, have it written on paper in front of them, and still butcher the punchline. Also, considering Gaetz' history, is anyone else concerned that he was allowed to say this stuff, let alone be in a room full of teenagers? Now, if you don't know the history of butthead-looking Matt Gaetz, here's some background. It should come as no surprise that Gaetz' former high school classmates described him as an asshole. Some even said they could have predicted his sex scandals, and others, they called Gaetz an emotional vampire. In 2008, Gaetz was arrested for a DUI after driving back from a nightclub called The Swamp. Also, this thing known as Matt Gaetz coming out of the swamp seems very fitting. Early on in Matt Gaetz' career as a politician, he invented a sex game where he and his fellow male colleagues got points for sleeping with aides, interns, lobbyists, and married legislators. Gaetz also has a habit of sharing nude photos on the House floor of women that he has slept with. You know, typical behavior for a hypocritical, God-loving Christian. In 2017, Gaetz voted against the Combating Human Trafficking in Commercial Vehicle Act. Surprise, surprise, the guy who is currently being investigated for sex trafficking and having sex with a minor voted against the anti-human trafficking bill. Oh, and in 2018, Gaetz invited white nationalist Chuck Johnson to Trump's State of the Union. And when Gaetz was asked about it, he pulled a Trump and said, "Don't know the guy." In 2019, Gaetz tweeted that Florida's welcome sign should be changed to, "There's no age that you can't be sexy." Something a sexual predator would absolutely say. Even Matt Gaetz' sister-in-law finds him weird and creepy. And when she was 19, Gaetz tried to set her up with an older man who was divorced and had a child. So then in 2021, a federal investigation was opened up into Matt Gaetz and his friend / disgraced former Seminole County tax collector, Joel Greenberg. Greenberg originally faced 33 federal charges but cut a deal with prosecutors and pleaded guilty to 6 charges, including sex trafficking a minor. In a confession letter written by Greenberg, he says that he and Gaetz both paid for sex with multiple women as well as a girl who was 17 at the time. They provided cash, gas money, gifts, rent, or partial tuition payments via Venmo. Also, no one should be surprised that this creep had to literally pay girls to have sex with him. And in that very same confession letter, Greenberg discusses asking Roger Stone to help him secure a pardon from former President Donald Trump for the price of $250,000. Speaking of pardons, we found out during the January 6 hearings that Matt Gaetz asked for a pardon for everything from the beginning of time till now. So, what is Matt Gaetz trying to hide, and how many crimes has Matt Gaetz committed since birth? And the pardons don't stop there. Matt Gaetz was also working on getting Roger Stone a pardon back in 2019. Here's a clip that was recorded by documentary filmmakers following Roger Stone for their film, A Storm Foretold.
I'll go down hard, though. I'll fight it right to the bitter end.
Yeah, but I don't think you're going to go down at all at the end of the day.
Well, we'll see. We're 3 weeks from trial.
Yeah. But...
I mean, I may have to appeal to the big man because it's the District of Columbia. We surveyed 120 jurors. 90 of them know who I am and they hate my guts. Voluntarily.
I don't think the big guy can let you go down for this. This is so fucked up.
And then there's this audio clip of Matt Gaetz attempting to sound like a mobster.
Well, you're fucked.
Yeah, no,
Well, on the trial, I still believe you don't do it, do you?
well, we shall see. I won't fold, that you can bet. They already tried that.
Huh? And the boss still has a very favorable.
He sends that message from time to time.
So, he knows you're
It would have been easy to make this go away, but I couldn't live with myself.
So jumping to this year, 2022, Matt Gaetz voted against another anti-human trafficking bill. The creep is literally telling everyone who he is. Again. And what's even worse is that 19 other Republicans voted against this bill as well. It turns out that fellow insurrectionists such as Biggs, Boebert, Brooks, Gomer, Gosar, Green, and Perry are pro-human trafficking. In the span of 5 years, the Republican Party has gone from one person being publicly pro-human trafficking to 20. Republicans creepily project their own sick obsession with pedophiles, people's genders, and the LGBTQ community. This is the same party that forces a pregnant 10-year-old rape victim to have a child, but then accuses others of being groomers. It's almost like they're not so subtly telling us who they really are. And now that brings us to Matt Gaetz body-shaming 19-year-old activist Olivia Julianna. Quick side note, I've noticed there's a trend with Republican men getting off on harassing women. Alex Stein, Eric Greitens, Donald Trump Jr. I mean, the list goes on. Anyway, back to Gaetz. He sent this tweet with Olivia's photo, and this, my friends, is the moment that Matt Gaetz stepped in a huge pile of shit. Olivia is one of the toughest and hardest working activists that I know, and she's not even 20 years old yet. Gaetz tried to own the libs, and what followed was a masterclass in activism. Here's Olivia on Katie Fang's show.
So you've called Gaetz's comments outright misogyny and fat phobia. We reached out to the congressman's team about those body shaming claims. This is what we got back from Gaetz's spokesperson. Quote, Congressman Gaetz never mentioned the adult's weight. Leftist media did. What do you think about that official response from Matt Gaetz's office?
I think it's quite telling that Gaetz's office would try to keep the word teenager out of the headline. Seeing last time Matt Gaetz and teenager trended together, it didn't end so well for him.
Wait, what was that?
Last time Matt Gaetz and teenager trended together, it didn't end so well for him.
Olivia was able to spin Gaetz's disgusting and hateful comments into something positive and meaningful. I mean, it wasn't even a fair fight. She had him in a chokehold within the first 24 hours. And within 72 hours of his attack, Olivia had raised over $1 million for abortion funds. And then just 48 hours later, she raised over $2 million. Olivia raised over $2 million off of Matt Gaetz's forehead. And at the end of the day, sex trafficker Matt Gaetz is nothing more than a loudmouth, privileged, below-average white guy who got into office due to nepotism. Gaetz has accomplished nothing during his time as a lawmaker other than a very long list of scandals. You know, people say don't mess with Texas, but I feel like the real lesson here is don't fuck with Texas women. Way to go, Olivia. Well, I'm Gabe Sanchez, and this has been What Was That?